Good morning. Off to work. Time for another chat. Now, originally, I was going to start the kiths today, but I've had to think about it, and I'm away over this weekend, and it seems disjointed to do the first kith and then not do a video for a few days. So I'm going to hold off on that, and instead I'm going to do another video about chimerical objects based on some discussions that have happened in the group over the last few days. So you'll probably remember from I believe my second video that I did in the series when I talked about the chimerical world and how changelings are both human and fae, and they have these two forms that one of the forms only other changelings and creatures with fairy sight can see, and how a lot of items also have this chimerical quality. And I mentioned in that you could have things like the chef's ladle that's old and broken, but when a fae sees it, they see this shining gold ladle because it was the ladle that the chef was using when he cooked his masterpiece. That once-in-a-lifetime best dish ever. And it infused that glamour and wonder into that ladle. I've also mentioned briefly things like the umbrella that's in fact the local changeling lord's longsword. And a couple questions came out regarding that statement that I think are worth looking at. The question that was asked was, if a changeling has a chimerical longsword, so it looks like an umbrella to normal people, it looks like a longsword to changelings, can that hurt normal people? Can that hurt mortals? Extending the question as well there, then, can it hurt other supernaturals? And the answer there is both yes and no. Although even the no is yes a little bit. If you hit a mortal over the head with an umbrella, yes, it will hurt them. But it's not going to hurt them like a sword would. They're probably going to be very confused at why you're hitting them over the head with an umbrella. And they will be in pain, but it might not have the full effect you are after. Now, if you do want the full effect, a fae, a changeling, can spend glamour to temporarily force a chimerical seeming into reality. This works both with themselves and with chimerical objects. I referenced the show Grimm before, where all of the kind of animal spirit beings, I can't remember what they're called, I'm going to be completely honest, all of them can see each other for the kind of being they are, but humans just see humans. But if they focus, if they make an effort to do so, then they can bring that other appearance to the front so that anyone can see it. And that in Changeling is represented by the spending of glamour. You imbue your own glamour into the item, and the umbrella vanishes and a sword is there. Now, at that point, the sword can damage humans, vampires, werewolves, whatever, because it is now a sword. And taking that a step further, it might not only just be a sword, it might be a magical sword. Or a enchanted sword, or however you want to refer to it. And it will possess then, in reality, whatever powers it possessed in the dreaming. So yes, it is possible to damage non-changelings with a chimerical weapon, but it requires the imbuing of glamour. And it usually only lasts a few minutes, and then, or possibly even until you put the item down, and then it goes back to being what it was. A brilliant example of this, actually, that a lot of people will be familiar with, although they won't probably appreciate me adding it and mentioning it as a changeling thing. But when you talk about the story of Moses, where he took his staff and cast it onto the ground and it became a snake. And then he picked it up again and it became a staff again. That could very easily be done through a chimerical item and spending of glamour. The other question then that came up was, if a mortal picks up a pin and truly believes it to be a sword, could they damage a changeling with it? Now, I'm not exactly sure how this situation would arise, because most mortals don't have the capacity to truly believe in something that they don't see. The only mortals, I guess you could say, that have the ability to look at one thing and declare it to be something else would be mages. And they're very unlikely to just believe it. They're likely to make it a sword. But let's just say, for argument's sake, in this instance, that it did happen. The person picks up the pen and goes to use it like a dagger or a sword. Would it damage a fae or a changeling? The answer is no, because it's not just believing something to be something else that gives it a chimerical seeming. I mentioned before, it was the chef's one true masterpiece, the best dish of his life. And he realized that at the time that he cooked it, and that epiphany of realizing that this was the pinnacle of his craft. This was the best. And in that moment of realization of that spark of a moment, that's what infused the ladle. It wasn't just that he believed the ladle was gold. He believed that he had created a masterpiece, and that glamour had to go somewhere. And the ladle soaked it up. So, you would be more likely to find that a pin that becomes a chimerical sword hasn't done so because someone's trying to use a pin like a sword. What they've done is they've written a very cutting political argument, or a presidential nomination speech for a change candidate that's really shaken a lot of people's beliefs, or they've written a philosophy book that it's really challenged people's outlooks and, really just done something great. If you think about things like, the art of war, or whatever item was used for the writing of the art of war, that is a book that has echoed through, decades and centuries. Not many centuries, but still a couple. Whatever item was used to place that onto paper, or parchment, or bamboo, or whatever it happened to be placed on originally, I don't know. That item would likely have been imbued with chimerical quality. The pen that was used to write the Declaration of Independence. Definitely a chimerical item. The lanterns that were lit for Paul Revere. These items of significance. I'm going to relate this to another kind of bizarre show that a lot of people will have probably never watched. Warehouse 13. Now, in Warehouse 13, they are basically a couple agents for an undocumented government agency that are going out there and hunting down artifacts. Bell's first telephone, or Susan B. Anthony's sewing needle, or Tesla's lightning gun. Now, the only difference really between Warehouse 13 items and Changeling items, chimerical items, is that in Warehouse 13, those items functioned in the real world, and everyone saw them, but no one understood them. That was basically the central premise of the show, that they were trying to hide them away. Get them away from people so they couldn't hurt anyone, and hide them away. But the idea of the items, the fact that they were imbued with greatness by some singular event, is the same we're looking for in chimerical items. It's just a matter of, with chimerical items, they only change in the dreaming unless someone makes an effort to force them into the real world. Now, there was one further question that was posed, and this was regarding, again, mortals' interaction with chimerical items. And the question was regarding, let's go back to the example of the umbrella that is a sword. Excuse me. The umbrella that is a sword. Now, normally it's wielded by the local Changeling Lord, but let's say the Changeling Lord is getting robbed, and he drops his blade, he drops his umbrella, and a normal, average, mortal person sees the mugging, grabs the umbrella, and goes to hit the mugger with it. Are they hit with a sword, or are they hit with an umbrella? Well, 99% of the time, they're hit with an umbrella. Why? Well, first off, because if you have a mortal and the thief is a mortal, then the chimerical world never enters into it. It's like we said before, if you don't spend glamour, it's an umbrella. So, yeah, if you don't spend any glamour on it, mortal hits a mortal, they hit him with an umbrella. Even if a mortal hits a changeling with it, the odds are that it's still going to be an umbrella. Because what have I mentioned previously? The word intent. If their intent is to bash them over the head with an umbrella, then that is, by and large, the intent of what is going to happen. Now, there are some situations where that could change, where a changeling sees the blade for what it is and realizes what it is, and depending on how far that changeling is into the dream, that changeling may not be able to see it as an umbrella. Now, I'm going to get into this at some point when I talk about a changeling's kind of average day or average life. But changelings have to walk a very tight line between succumbing to banality and becoming lost in the dream. They have to keep themselves centered so that they can see both sides. If they find themselves lost in banality, it destroys them. It unmakes their changeling self. If they get lost in the dreaming, if they turn away completely from reality, then they drift away from the changeling bond, and their fey self departs into the dreaming and usually is lost. So, unless you have a changeling attacker that is so deep into the dream that they cannot perceive the mortal item anymore, a mortal, even hitting a changeling with a chimerical weapon, is still hitting them with an umbrella. I hope that's made sense. I've gone a little bit longer than I originally intended to today. Luckily, the traffic's been slow, so I haven't made it to work yet. So, I'm going to leave it there. Like, subscribe. I'm traveling tomorrow, but my wife's with me, so it's doubtful that I'll be recording. I might. Who knows? My wife might decide to guest star and say hello. I doubt it. Don't get your hopes up. And if nothing else, I will be back on Monday for the game predictions, Tuesday for the game recap, and Wednesday for more changeling talk. Might finally break open the list of kiths and start doing some of those videos. Anyway, have a great day, enjoy it, and it's almost Friday. Remember that.